Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, this cold Tuesday, April 18th, downtown Cleveland. Roll call, please.
And just as a reminder to all who are in attendance, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the county's YouTube page. Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher,
Here.
Ms. Conwell,
Present.
Mr. Tuma,
Here.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Ms. Simon. I know Ms. Simon is here, she just stepped out. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Miller and Sweeney are in attendance.
Welcome, gentlemen. Is there public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you. And we'll go out of order. We'll take 05 first, 03 second.
Ordinance number 2023-0005, renumbering section 202.07 of the county code to 204.02, and to clarify the duties of the county sheriff's department and the county sheriff.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly, you want to just move forward with Sheriff Reed?
Yes, let's move forward.
For members of the committee, I think we're all familiar with Bob Reed. He was initially our first appointed sheriff, and he was the actual sheriff before the charter was implemented. Many of us are obviously aware of his tenure, his history, and his dedication to Northeast Ohio and specifically Cuyahoga County. Sheriff Reed wanted to discuss the legislation that's before us, give us a little historical background as to his experiences as not only the sheriff before the charter, but as the first sheriff with the charter. And I think that would be very helpful for all of us to understand history of this position. Sheriff, welcome.
Well, thank you, Chairman Gallagher and Councilman Kelly and all of council. Thank you very, very much for having me. I appreciate it. I hope I can give you some insight into the sheriff's office, Councilman. The sheriff's office back in 2009 when it was still an elected position, and then into 2013. But let me first, if you don't mind, is just give you a brief resume of where I'm coming from. I was a Mayfield High School graduate in 1969. I went in the military in 1970 and came out, went to Cuyahoga Community College and Cleveland State University and received my degree in my bachelor's degree in business administration. And in 1975, joined the Bedford Police Department. I served in every capacity in the department, from SWAT team to narcotics to the head of the Detective Bureau, sergeant, lieutenant, and was very fortunate in 1989 to be appointed the chief of police. So I was chief of police for almost 11 years until the city manager. And during my tenure as chief of police, I was fortunate enough to attend the FBI National Academy in 1992, prestigious school that you get asked to attend. It was my honor in doing that. And in 2000, the city manager in the city of Bedford, as most of you know, the city of Bedford government is a city manager form of government, the last one in Cuyahoga County. The city manager was leaving. I had my 25 years in. Council contacted me and asked me if I would be interested. I was, and I became the city manager in the city of Bedford for almost 10 years. I served in the Mayors and Managers Association. At that time, when I was the city manager, I kept my certification in law enforcement as an Ohio a law enforcement officer. Just to keep it. Plus, I was a safety director as the city manager, and I felt that it was probably important for me to keep that certification. I was approached in 2009. Actually, I was playing golf in Arizona when they contacted me and said, would you be interested in the position of sheriff? As many of you know, things were going on in the county in reference to the sheriff's position. Sheriff McFall was in the office for almost 35 years, and things were happening. I said I would be interested. There was about 8 or 9 candidates for the position of sheriff. I was very proud in being appointed the sheriff of Cuyahoga County. And for many didn't know, I took actually a $12,000 a year cut in salary to take that position. But I said, one, I would be honored to be the sheriff. And secondly, why not finish your career as a law enforcement officer in the largest sheriff's department in the state of Ohio? So it was absolutely my honor to serve. The first 6 months of my tenure as sheriff was very, very difficult. As many of you know, when you come in as a change agent into an organization, you have to fire people, you have to demote people, and regardless of, well, if you think that it's a good thing to do for the organization, which I did, those are very difficult things to do. To fire people, and it affects not only them, but it also affects their family. To demote people, it affects that individual, and it affects the organization as a whole. It was very, very difficult the first 6 months that I was sheriff, but we got through it. I just want to touch on some of the things that we did in the sheriff's office. For the first 2 years as an autonomous sheriff in an elected position, I was going to have to run in 2010 if they didn't change the form of government, which you all know they did. So I didn't have to run. But the first 2 years as the county sheriff, I knew as the chief of police in a suburb of Cleveland that what some of the things that chiefs do. For example, we would take prisoners from Cuyahoga County and we would house them in our jail for $85 to $95 a day. When I came in, I went to our legal, Chris Russ, our legal officer, and said, listen, what can the sheriff do in reference to, and there's a reason I'm telling you this, what can the sheriff do in reference to paying suburbs to house prisoners? So he did the research in a day, and he said, you're the sheriff, you can charge whatever, you can pay whatever you want, as long as they're accepted. So I went to Geauga County, asked Geauga County, what would you charge to house our prisoners? As you know, if you got to a certain point, and let me back up just a moment, you get to a certain point in the sheriff's office or in the jail, you get to about 2,100 prisoners, and we were actually built for 1,760, but we would get to 2,100, and the wardens and the director of corrections would come to me and say, we have to start shipping prisoners out. It's getting too overcrowded. So with that said, I went to Geauga County and asked, what would you charge to house our prisoners? They said $55 a day. I put out a memo to all the communities in Cuyahoga County and said, if you want our prisoners, if you want our prisoners, we will pay $55 a day plus medical and all prescription drugs. So all the communities in Cuyahoga County agreed except for one. So we started shipping out our prisoners and using some common sense also, not shipping in the last ones in to the last ones out, which made no sense. We shipped out the healthy ones. We shipped out those that weren't on prescription drugs, if possible. And what we did in 4 years was save the county $19 million in prisoner costs in 4 years just from doing that. And in addition to a number of other issues that we did over the 4-year period of time. We started the impact unit at County Executive Fitzgerald's urging. Let me back up a minute. So in January of 2011, as you know, the county structure changed. Ed Fitzgerald became the county executive. He appointed me as sheriff. I served, and from day one with the county executive, I said, your goals and objectives are mine. I look forward to working with you. But at the same time, our relationship was always a little rocky. And I think part of that is because when you get your pension behind you, you speak your mind on a number of issues, and I always did it professionally, and I always did it behind closed doors. But there comes to a certain point in time where you don't like to hear some things. I appointed Dr. John Burnett as the head of the Corrections, the head of the jail's medical unit. Many of you know Dr. Burnett because he testified in front of you on a number of issues in reference to the jail. So Dr. Burnett was just an outstanding 30-year veteran of federal corrections. He knew more, he forgot more than I would ever know about medical in the jail environment. He did a wonderful, wonderful job, and he would tell me every 2 days I would have a meeting with him to ask him how the jail was going, and he would say, hey, listen, we have to start hiring more nurses, we have to start hiring more pharmacists, assistants, we have to keep, and we got to get the salaries of our nurses and our technicians, we have to get them up to where it is in the private sector. And I would go to the county executive and to Matt, chief of staff, I can't remember his last name. What is it? Oh, Carroll, Matt Carroll. I would go to Matt Carroll and the county executive probably weekly to say, listen, we have to increase, talking about issues involving the jail. We had 2,100 prisoners, 1,300 of those were on some type of psychotropic medication. I would tell the county executive we need to have more than one psychiatrist on staff. We need to have, not that we're going to change people's demeanor and the way they live in their life, but what we were going to do with another county psychiatrist would be to try to save people from killing themselves. So, I believe the county executive and the chief of staff were tired from hearing me. And they did not like when the county, when the Dr. Burnett testified in front of the council, the county executive was very upset with me that happened. And in January of 2013, the county executive brought me into his office. I had no idea that this was going to happen. He brought me into the office and he said, we're going into 2013 without you as the county sheriff. And I said, okay. I've been in your uncomfortable position many times. And the individual that I would tell that information to would either know the reason why they were being separated from the organization, or I would tell them what the reason was. So I said to the county executive, I says, you know what, that's not good enough. I need to know the reasons why you want me to leave, and I won't resign unless you give me a reason, and if you feel that you have to, give it to the press as well. And he said, I'm not going to go into detail, we're just going to go separate ways. And I said, well, I won't resign. And it was kind of odd. For 5 days, I wouldn't resign, and he was firing me, but at the same time, I stayed in my position for almost a week to get my things in order, and I left, and what I should have probably one of the few regrets I have of being in the sheriff's office was that I hate to use the term a whistleblower because I think it's kind of unprofessional as far as law enforcement is concerned, but I probably should have shared information with the media if they would have been eager to hear it, that I believe he fired me because of the reasons that when 2018 came around and we lost 8 prisoners because of issues involving medical in the jail. It started in 2013. Had we started back then in 13 doing some of the things that I wanted to do and our staff wanted to do, I think we may have eliminated the issues in 2018. That's a guess on my part. I checked 6 months later to make sure that there was no letter of resignation in my file. I did a public records request. There wasn't anything in my file as far as a letter of resignation. So I never resigned, although the press would say that I resigned. And I just read something this morning from Google that said the Sheriff Reed had resigned at the request of the county executive. Let me end with this. I told our staff in 2011, when the county executive became the county executive, that he had a very difficult job, and let's be patient with him. And if we can, let's do our jobs, but at the same time be patient, that changes are going to come, and especially in the jail, but they didn't. And as I said, he had a difficult job. I would share a lot of my thoughts with him. I wish I would have shared more, actually, before he let me go. But he did, and I have very few regrets. I enjoyed being at the tenure as the county sheriff. I've just given you a brief snapshot of my career and my thoughts as far as the county sheriff's concerned. One thing I would add, I think as a county sheriff, the one thing that I had in the first 2 years as an independent and autonomous sheriff was we had our own HR department. And with our own HR department, we were able to hire people quicker, even though it was still at glacial speed at times. We were able to hire people quicker than the sheriffs after the first 2 years of autonomy. When I became under the HR department, when the sheriff's office became under the HR department of the county, things went even slower. And it was so difficult losing people so quickly and not being able to hire staff. So I understand now that there's the HR department now in the sheriff's department, not completely autonomous from the county, and I understand that, but that's probably was a very, very good move on the part. I don't know who made that decision, Consul, I'll give you that, made that decision, but I think that was a very, very good and a move in the right directions, because I've talked to my colleagues that have left this position, and many of them said, and I don't think Chris would mind me saying this, but he contacted me about a month into the sheriff's, when he was in the sheriff's position, and he would say to me, did you have as much trouble in hiring people as I have? And I said, you know what, in the first 2 years when I was an autonomous sheriff, when I was in the elected position, I didn't. And again, not to fault Ed Fitzgerald when he came in, things got slower, and I got it. I understood it. I said, but things got slower, and when slowness doesn't, you don't get better. So I think many of the sheriffs that had left or were in position after me had a lot of issues in reference to hiring people and the struggles that go along with that. So with that said, I'm certainly open to any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Sheriff. Questions? Tuma?
Sheriff, hey, thanks for being here today. I
Sure.
appreciate the background there. I got a question for you. As far, it sounds like you and the county executive might have had not the best working relationship. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
When you were discharged, currently we have in place an opportunity for a hearing. Would you have taken part in a hearing before council to argue to save your job?
I absolutely would have, and that's a very good question. I don't believe that the county executive, Ed Fitzgerald, would have fired me had it been in place what you have in place today,
right,
where council has to concur with the firing of the county sheriff. I don't believe that he would have done that. I don't want to say that, I was a popular sheriff, but I think I was. The press treated me well. I don't think that he wanted to go through that. And when the press asked him on a number of occasions, why would you fire the sheriff? The day the sheriff left, when I left, I came down on the elevator, and the elevator opened, and there was 150 employees there that were clapping and thanking me for my service. So he knew that I was a popular among the ranks. I would have, to answer your question directly, I would have favored that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And outside of our current sheriff, present company excluded, I would say, but we haven't really heard from any of the prior sheriffs who left, and so we don't really know reasons why they left. And I appreciate your candor and forthrightness. Appreciate that.
Sure.
And we'll go to Mr. Miller in a minute. I have been in contact with Sheriff Bova, Sheriff Schilling, Sheriff Pinckney, and Sheriff Violin. Sheriff Violin and Sheriff Bova, because of their jobs now, would be open to speaking to you on their thoughts, and I would highly recommend you take that opportunity. And Sheriff Pinckney and Sheriff Schilling will be sending letters to the council people, because that question was put out to the public, and it was true We didn't have exit interviews, we just had exits of sheriffs with no explanation. So we were kind of left in the dark. So to put a bright light on their thoughts, and again, thank you for being here. You've been open to letting us know what it was all about over there. We were kind of in the dark, so hopefully that puts a light on it.
Councilman, I would have favored that. And I think maybe all of, it certainly wasn't a cowardly act for me to resign. And I say that because at the time, I never got the opportunity except for the press. And I got I don't want to interrupt you, but one thing, I understood the press when the press said, listen, this is the type of government that Cuyahoga County residents have voted in. You've accepted that the county executive can fire an individual and doesn't have to give a reason for it. I think the government was so new at the time that the press didn't want to intervene on my firing. I think today, as you know, the press is looking into it more closely.
Mr. Chair, I've got to go to another meeting. I'll let them question, but I just want to say that I'd like to hear from the executive, especially former executive Fitzgerald, and I do recall having committee meetings about the overtime excessiveness under your reign, as well as other issues. So I think today, I appreciate you bringing in the sheriff, but it's we're not hearing anything else from the executives. And I just want to state as well, if we're going to start to look at oversight of directors, then we have to be equal across the board. There's nothing unique or special, in my opinion, about having a sheriff versus a medical examiner. And I think if we're going to examine looking at oversight, I think we need it for everybody or nobody. And those are my positions. But I would appreciate the chair bringing in, if possible, the executive who can speak to the reasons why there was a clash. And that's why I think it's very important to have oversight in all these departments.
Councilwoman, before you leave, I would like to say that on the record that that's inaccurate in reference to the overtime issue that you mentioned. I would welcome the county executive to come in and share some of the issues with him. That is absolutely inaccurate. I was under budget at the time I left.
Well, we had committee meetings on it. I was sitting in the seat when we had, through the chair to the former sheriff, we actually had committee meetings over the issue of overtime, and that's not something that you can stand on your position, but there were issues of overtime.
Can I say one thing?
Council, I don't care through the chair if he
Chair?
wants to
Absolutely.
do that.
There's a difference between excess overtime and when the county executive wanted to introduce the impact unit, which was 10 individuals, 10 officers that were directed towards issues throughout Cuyahoga County, festivals and so forth. That threw up the overtime. That was at his thought and his direction.
Mr. Chair, that's why I'm not sure bringing in sheriffs to litigate and argue about what happened in the past is valuable.
Thank you. I will absolutely extend the invitation to Mr. Fitzgerald, but I think he had a great opportunity to clear the air and an obligation, in my opinion, to the Cuyahoga County Council to tell us why, and not to throw darts in the dark and have private conversations with individual council people about maybe why this happened. That's part of my concern all the way through this, is that we have always been the ones in the dark throwing darts as to why these things have happened. And again, the charter, in their infinite wisdom, allowed the opportunity for an executive to do what he did. He was, as you have stated, well within his rights to do that. And the county council, because the fathers of the charter were so, visionary in cutting us out of actually finding out why this happened. So things have changed a little bit. Things have become a little bit more open, a little bit more clear. And nothing's perfect. And again, as you stated, we were new at the time. And when you're new, things happen. And
I understand that.
but I will definitely extend that invitation and allow you the same invitation if he so accepts it. Mr. Miller, did I? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, nice seeing you.
Good to see you, Councilman.
First, let me thank you for all your years of service, but particularly being the sheriff here.
Thank you very much.
And just the dialogue, we're talking about legislation 05 in regards to the reporting of the sheriff. And I appreciate all the background and getting to the bottom of your very specific lingering thing that is hanging over you. You just want to call him out and say, what's up? But I think that's a different meeting. So just, when you say you're autonomous, you said it about 3 or 4 times, but tell me about that, because you reported to the, or you interacted with the executive and he could fire you. So tell me about why you think that was autonomous.
It wasn't. When I say autonomy, I said the first 2 years that I was the county sheriff, you know, I had that certain level of autonomy. You know, as an elected sheriff, I had to answer to 1.2 million
No, absolutely.
constituencies. After that, I wasn't no longer autonomous. I had, as in an autonomous position, I answered to the county executive. I knew that. In fact, I told the county executive, you know what, my entire career of 34 years in law enforcement and as city manager, I always had a boss. I said, so having to answer to the county executive, I had no problem with, and I told him that on day one. So after the 2 years, when I was under the county executive's, under his veil, I had to answer to the county executive.
Okay, and through the chair, and that's a whole nother topic too, the
Yes.
appointed sheriff versus elected sheriffs, and I think this body's going to get involved, at least I'm going to start talking about it a little bit more in the future in regards to what I believe.
Absolutely. And I would be willing to come in to discuss that with you as well.
And through the chair too, and it was nice being autonomous.
It
Reporting to 1.2 million people.
was, and you know what, at the end of the day, I was under the microscope by the plain dealer, being the first sheriff in 35 years, or the different sheriff in 35 years, and the history of the sheriff's office, the 3 previous sheriffs having been indicted, you know, it was important that the press stayed on top of it. I got it. I understood that.
Through the chair, you restored it.
And you know what I said?
Confidence of the sheriff's
I said it's an open book. I mean, come on in, ask me whatever you need to ask me, and report whatever you think is the most important thing to report. I let another number of people go, as I said, Councilman, because I thought it was the best thing for the county. And when I had the press, for example, attacked me on an issue of letting go some of the people that were in not the auditors, they did the appraisals, the appraisals office.
Yeah.
And I said, I understand that. That's fine. I was under a microscope. I had to do what I had to do, but I appreciated I appreciated that. I was okay with it.
No, and through the chair, I mean, I'm going way back with you
Sure.
because you inherited all those folks.
I
And
did.
you did your vetting and you made your decision as the elected sheriff. When you mentioned, I just talked through the chair to Chairman Tuma. You had a rough relationship with the previous executive.
I'm sorry, what type of?
You had a rough relationship with the previous executive?
Yeah, I did.
Somewhat combative, maybe?
Pardon me?
Somewhat combative on occasion?
Yeah, yeah, he's not here to defend himself.
No,
so-
and that's
but
good. I'm trying to make a
He
point.
wanted, just so you know, and he wanted to be the county sheriff in 2009.
No,
He had approached a number of colleagues of mine to see if he could become the county sheriff.
I didn't know that
And I
bit of
think
history.
that, and most people don't know that. And he approached those colleagues, and the colleague says, well, listen, in the state of Ohio, you have to be a law enforcement officer to be the sheriff.
he thought it was a little bit.
And so I don't know if that was an issue or not. I never met the county executive. I never met Ed Fitzgerald before I became sheriff.
And then through the chair, you mentioned when you took the job, you fully knew and you were okay with reporting to the executive.
Well, when I took the job, I was an elected position. So,
But you coming in, you
Yes.
just stated that you knew you're coming in, you're reporting, working with the executive, and you were okay with that.
I was, and I
Yeah.
told him that.
And if you had change the personalities, if you have a partner that is truly committed to a sheriff's department working with you, would that be a scenario that would be beneficial?
Yes.
Okay. I will thank you for answering those questions, and I look forward to helping you any way we can in your private life, because you've always been cool with me.
Thank you,
Thank you, Mr.
Councilman.
Chairman.
We're kind of swerving off the issue here, so we can right ourselves. Yes, Mr. Kelly.
off the issue.
No, we're-
Sheriff Reed, thank you so much for coming today. You have a very impressive resume. I'm jealous, actually.
Thank you, Councilman.
Did you get a chance to see the ordinance that we're talking about, 05?
I did.
And what was your opinion of it?
I think it's a good addition to what you have now as far as the protection for the sheriff. I like a number of the issues. One of the issues is within that the sheriff can approach council and ask for an increase in his budget or her budget if necessary. The issue with that is that it probably is going to develop some contentiousness between the sheriff and the county executive. If the county executive is in opposition to that budget increase. But if the sheriff can come in front of council and show council that that's needed. Hello, Councilman, through the chair. If the county sheriff can show that this is needed and for medical, whatever it may be, I think it's a good thing. And some of the other issues that you have here as far as accountability and certain issues of autonomy, where the sheriff now, for the most part, even though the sheriff would have to realize that he's still under the direction of the county executive, but with this ordinance, it gives the sheriff more autonomy. It gives the sheriff the ability to have his subordinates look at the county sheriff and say the county sheriff is in charge.
So in your opinion, would this be the best way to go to give that autonomy to a sheriff that isn't elected?
Yes.
I appreciate you being here and for your honest opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair to former Sheriff Reed. So what would stop you from, or any sheriff, from just, you have your due diligence that you do with your boss, but we're a separate branch of government. Why wouldn't you just come here for public safety and present on a regular basis, you know, what that budget looks like, and that you know, turned it into, but just for two separate branches, because we're the only one that's open and transparent here. Administration is not open and transparent unless, you know, they come here. You know, going forward, I don't see why that would be an issue.
Well, through the chair, Councilwoman, if you mean before when I was sheriff or now, if I was sheriff now?
Well, just either or. So, you know, I don't know. You know, I don't know what the administration is, but so you go to, on a normal basis, you're going to the administration and you're saying, hey, these are our needs. What stopped you from also having that relationship with the chair of council for the Public Safety Committee and just presenting the same thing that you presented to the boss? Was the boss saying, no, you couldn't do that?
I think it's a comfort level. I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm going to come to council and say, you know what, my $95 million budget, I don't even know what the sheriff's office budget is now, but it was $95 million when I was sheriff. And if I come to council and say that's not enough money, but I bypassed the.
I'm saying bypass.
But okay, so let's take it back a step. Go to the county executive and say, county executive, you know what? I think we need more pharmacist assistants. We need to raise the pay here. So my budget needs to be increased. If the county executive says no, and the county executive says, I would prefer that you don't go to council, and if I would then say, well, I'm going to council, now our relationship is really tarnished.
And so that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Were you being told that you couldn't? I think in this draft of legislation that we're trying to do, on fairness to both sides, because it is a new administration, if we can make that clear, that that's an autonomy to a degree.
agree.
That the sheriff has their meeting with whatever they do with the administration, but the administration is aware that that report is also going to come to council, to legislation through this, via this committee to state everything that they said. Then at the end of the day, it takes you out of it. He may say no, we may say yes, or we might say we agree. You know what I'm saying?
I understand completely.
But then it's open and it's transparent at that point.
And you know, I think that the charter change that you had that made, you know, the majority of council has to concur with the firing, I think that takes it to that takes it to one level. This ordinance certainly helps out. But again, you have to keep a relationship with the county executive. And if
That's just open and transparency between both.
I agree.
That's allowing whoever's sitting in that seat to be autonomous, like, it's not on their shoulders anymore. They're still getting the oversight, but they're letting their boss know, and they're letting the legislative half know. And then that's for the president and the county exec to have those future discussions. But at least we all are aware, and it's not secret until it gets to the plain dealer.
Yeah, I was always, Councilwoman, I was always fearful of the issue as sheriff that things would start to happen in the jail, especially the jail. And that if we didn't do something and I didn't say something about it, that I would be, you know, part and parcel to that. And, you know, it's only so far you can go. When I asked Dr. John Burnett to come to council, that was actually without the concurrence of the county executive. And I knew it was going to be hell to pay for that. And for the most part it was. So I think that shouldn't have happened. I don't think it had to go that far as I was concerned. But you're right. There's between your charter amendment that you've got and this legislation that's been introduced, I think that you've got enough autonomy there without being completely.
But it probably needs to be spelled out and a little clearer for the executive and whoever's on either side, that whatever someone presents to you, they should also be able to, you know, for them to agree that they're going to present in front of public safety as well. So we're all on board of the issues, and then we can make some determinations of what goes on and what money is spent, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is more directed to Mr. Kelly. I just want to, just so I can get some clarity on the ordinance that you're proposing. Under this ordinance, who has the, I didn't see it, maybe I missed it, who has the authority to remove the sheriff? Under
Council.
It's still council, it hasn't changed?
That's a charter.
Okay, under the charter, and the process is still the same?
Right, nothing has changed except for the fact that the sheriff doesn't have to report constantly to the executive, that he would be basically in every 3 months, or whatever, his report, just like the inspector general, to the executive, to council. And of course, the executive can call him for questions anytime, and so can we. But this gives him a little more autonomy without constantly having to go and ask for permission for everything he wants to do.
And it's basically a separate, the ability to request funding separately from what the executive has in place?
I would have to defer to Mr. King on that.
Yeah, I don't
A
think we
request
really
for
know
funding
change.
during the budget?
Councilman Tuma, could you repeat the question for me?
Yeah, as far as requests for funding, is that separate from what the budget would be for the executive? Would it have its own, the sheriff have his or her own budget and request funding at budget hearings or before public safety or what have you?
No, Michael King, council staff, for the record. No, the ordinance provides that the sheriff's budget will be submitted as part of the executive's recommended biennial budget, which is outlined, that whole process is outlined in the charter. But it clarifies that nothing in the ordinance is intended to prohibit the sheriff from transmitting supplemental budgetary requests once the executive's budget has been transmitted to council, because council has the authority, obviously, to amend.
So he or she would have to come before council at a separate committee meeting requesting,
Yeah, presumably it would be
additional
during a
funding.
budget hearing of some kind, but.
kind of
yeah,
like any director does now.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my colleague, Mr. Kelly. You mentioned constantly reporting to the, he doesn't have to constantly report to the executive. With this piece of legislation, does he have to report to the executive at all?
Yes, has to submit a report quarterly, just like the Inspector General.
And through the chair to my colleague, I don't like loose ends or silent. The definition of report is very important to me. And what the Inspector General has to do is post online information from a 5-person department that has a budget of $3 million or so. So for a sheriff's department, I'd really need to know, from my perspective, what the definition of report is. And I've asked that the last time I was here, and I'm asking it again this time. And in my eyes, this legislation gives the opportunity to have him make a report, whatever his definition or her definition is. And if we're going exactly what the AG says, all they have to do is put it online, and that's all they have to do. And if the executive says, come on in, I want to understand what's happening, they could say no. And if the council agrees with that mindset, they can say, okay, we're okay with that. So I think there's a lot of room for a sheriff that is noble. We have no problems. A sheriff that is less than noble, we could have serious problems, in my perspective, through the chair.
To my colleague, through the chair, we can still ask that sheriff to come in here and explain things, too.
And through the chair, we can. And if the council, I think we're driving things by personalities instead of by structure. So a scenario could be the executive, he's not reporting to the executive, telling him anything, not letting him in the sheriff's office or in the sheriff's department or the jail. And he comes to council, and council's okay with that because we don't have a good relationship or we don't think the executive's doing good. So then we're driving the train 100% ourselves. So we know we can come in, request that he comes into us. He could say no to us too, but we can fire him. Executive can't. So in my eyes, could be boxing out the administration 100% in the worst case scenario. And I'll get off my soapbox now, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Kelly, do you have a response?
Mr. Chairman, for clarity purposes, I didn't know that county council has the ability to fire the sheriff without the county executive giving that directive? Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Yeah.
We have the sole, through the chair, we have the sole discretion by the 8 council members per charter change that the people of Cuyahoga County overwhelmingly supported. So it's 100% our responsibility. That's where it's important for me to have as much oversight as possible because I'm one of 11 that would have to make the decision to, the substantial decision to terminate someone's employment.
Understand.
The assumption being that if something was so dramatically bad, that 8 council people would be moving that direction, that
Absolutely.
assumption would be the sheriff would resign,
Absolutely.
not having that kind of a support. But it would, we'd imagine something very bad happening. Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Sheriff Reed, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, President.
12 years we go back, and
Yes.
You're in that unique position of having been elected, but also serving in this as new government. So you have that unique perspective of the transition and the contrast. And I'll say this, we've talked about autonomy and independence, but over these 12 years and all that we have seen, I'm starting to see it as wanting to have a sheriff whose hands aren't handcuffed behind them as they do their job. We know it's a challenging job. Many jobs can be difficult, but those who step into them do them knowing the challenges. But what you don't expect is that you're asked to do the job with your hands tied behind your back and then held fully accountable for everything that happens. So we have been progressively and just organically looking at every moment when something happens, how do we respond? How do we create an environment where the sheriff can be as successful as possible? The charter amendment, of course, where, as you just said, it takes 8 councilmen now to remove the sheriff from office. The educational requirements, all of the things that the charter amendment, the residents of Cuyahoga County voted for, to try to, again, free the sheriff up to be more effective. But with that, now we have this piece of legislation, and it's a piece I'm glad to hear that you're a support of. I support as well. What I see in this legislation is placing the sheriff in a position similar to the inspector general, where the question of who do you report to actually goes away, because what you're saying is you don't report to anyone, and instead of the word report, I'm going to use the word ask permission. You don't have to ask permission when it comes time ultimately to what you might need to supplement your budget, or how you or the things that need to be done. You're given a greater level of, again, the ability to operate without your hands tied behind your back. Someone can, the department can say, well, we need X amount of dollars, but then the pushback might be, well, I can give you half of X. And then you go out and do your job and then held fully accountable for what you did on half the budget. So those are the things that I think this starts to address. Now, do we report? Are there paperwork? Are there information to be reported or shared? Those things can be done, and we expect, whether it's to this council or to the administration, but the act of asking permission is just another step closer to creating what we can do without being an elected sheriff in this environment, which is obviously the only one that I know and many of us have known in council. So we're trying to create that space in that environment. So whether we do it legislatively, by internal policy and all of those things, there's still that one dynamic, the one thing that none of this can address. We started to talk about it. It is, how does the sheriff interact with whether this body or the administration, and first executive first and foremost. I would suggest, I would put forward that whoever the executive is, whoever the sheriff is, that relationship and dynamic is going to have some natural, I don't know if the word is, I don't want to say tensions. The dynamics are where if you allow the sheriff to do the job that they have, the education, the experience, and the position to do, allow them to do that job as an executive, then they'll keep you out of the paper. They'll do the type of job that you did when you were sheriff, and you do that. But that is going to be on the council and the administration, executive first and foremost, to say, I want this sheriff to be effective. And I don't have to weigh in on everything. There can be an issue where the community will want the executive to tell the sheriff to do something. And if an executive takes the position, why are you calling me? Ask the sheriff. That empowers the sheriff. But if you say, I'll take care of it, now the community knows, okay, who the real sheriff in town is. And that's all fine and well in the good times. But when things get difficult, when something hits the fan, and then you look to the sheriff, well, that sheriff is not as empowered as he was, as he could have been. So that is the one thing we can't legislate from here or create policy. That is the part that is out there. We're moving closer, but it is also about the community understanding, the paper understanding, and everyone understand that there is a dynamic that if the sheriff is the sheriff, let him be the sheriff. Okay, and if you're the executive, okay, then respect that position, respect it in a way that will benefit the county when the difficult times come. So those are the things we're having those conversations now. We've had them publicly, privately, those things. But that is where I see us at this moment. It's still always an evolving. If we learn more, we'll do better. We'll do better. The idea of going back to elective sheriff, if that happened today, still take 2 years before that person's in place. And it only took 1 year to lose 10 lives. So whatever happens, we have to deal with this right now, regardless of what the future holds.
Council President, through the chair, thank you. I think that the relationship, I just want to get one thing clarified. I'm a little confused. The county executive can fire the sheriff, but it has to be concurred by council.
That is not correct.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the county executive cannot fire the sheriff. Not without aid, but he can fire, looking for counsel then to say, yes, I agree. And then should the county executive fire the sheriff, and then counsel says, no, he's not fired. But he can fire the sheriff.
Well, he can institute the procedure.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
Make a
Yes,
recommendation.
yeah, he can make a
He can make the
recommendation.
recommendation.
Or not. We can do it ourselves with him saying, keep them.
I get it.
That's the
I get it.
different one.
The hearing would be had in council by the council on the recommendation of the executive, and if council disagreed, we go back to square one.
Just briefly, to just answer a few of the things that you raised, is the relationship between the county sheriff and the county executive has to be a good one. It just does. This is business, business at a very, very high level. And it's got to have, the county executive, the county sheriff and the executive have to have a good working relationship. Not only just, between the two of them, but also certainly with council. I get that part. And I think that the form of government that you have, the form with the county, the sheriff being appointed, with these safeguards in place makes a big difference. But then again, 87 other counties say no, that the elected sheriff is the position that there should be. So I don't know. I think if it runs smoothly between the county sheriff and the county executive, I think that one, at the end of the day, no one's dying in the jail. That's a big deal, and that the jail is being run very, very efficiently. It's paramount in the sheriff's office.
I want to clarify one word I used. I described tension between the executive and sheriff. That's not the word I meant. I think there's a natural deference that takes place because you want to have that good relationship. And with that natural deference, it's on this council president, on the county executive to move in a way that benefits all of Cuyahoga County when it comes to how we interact with our sheriff, again, keeping him empowered. Mm-hmm.
I get it.
Yeah, the last point you made, it just went out of my head. It'll come back to me. I'll pass.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and to my colleagues, a couple of things regarding 23-5. Before we even get to the idea of that the executive and the sheriff have to have a good relationship, even before that, the executive and the sheriff have to have a relationship. As the legislation is written, the executive and the sheriff don't have to interact. All the sheriff has to do is send out a written report once every 3 months, and that's at the center of what my concern is. I think that the executive and the sheriff have to talk together. It has to be a back and forth relationship. It has to be interactive. They have to work together on county public safety policy and together speak with one voice for the county. The other thing is that the new executive is in the process of making a decision as to who he's going to recommend for sheriff, and is also making some changes to the executive structure, which seems to be working in the direction of a more direct relationship between the executive and the sheriff, as opposed to going through intermediaries. And it would be my process my preference to let this process play out and see what the executive does, and then after we see what the executive does, then we can ask the question of whether there's anything that needs to be done legislatively, but I'd be inclined to hold off for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I concur with my colleague Miller. I think we need to hold off on both. If I had to make a choice, I would be more inclined to clarify the reporting to the executive, I believe is Councilman Sweeney's proposed legislation. So I think we should let the executive have an opportunity to appoint a sheriff. Now, when I hear things like natural deference, I heard that from Council President, I'm not quite sure I understand that an executive must have a different kind of deference to a sheriff versus a medical examiner. Is that what you're saying? Or a public works director?
I was really referring to sheriff to executive.
The exec.
Sheriff to the exec, not the other way
Okay.
around.
Okay. Yes.
I meant by that.
Okay. Thank you. And when I hear about 86 other counties, well, there's only 2 charter county governments in the state, so that's not a fair comparison.
87.
Well, Summit has a charter government. So that's not it's not only you, Sheriff, it's other people say, well, all these other places, well, they're county structures. That's why. We have an opportunity to have a different kind of structure, and I think it's been working, and you know, the fact that sheriffs don't maybe want to hear or have oversight, I think is part of why I think there's been difficulty. Sheriffs are used to having their autonomy, and this creates a certain tension that I'll adopt from Council President. But I prefer we wait. I am not in favor of my colleagues' proposal that the sheriff report to no one. The only reason we have anything similar to that, as I expressed before, is the IG investigates the executive. So this body had to come up with a neutral way for that IG to do his or her job. This is different. This is not a similar situation that we're in with an IG. So I don't think it's good form to have no oversight, especially in today's climate with the police misconduct, law enforcement misconduct, not to say, and I said it before, that we don't have that now, but we could have it. And I think we need some type of oversight. And I think the oversight should go to the executive as proposed by colleague Sweeney, to the extent it needs clarification. So that would be my position as I sit here today, but certainly to have a sheriff that reports to nobody with no oversight other than this body that would have to get into the weeds and be responsible if something happened, that would box us in. That actually boxes us in. And I've never wanted to be in a position where this council needs to micromanage and have our staff go into the jail. And if there's a problem, that comes back to us. And I don't think that's wise. I don't think it's prudent. We're part-time. To have a death in that jail and then come back to this body, why didn't you fire that sheriff when that death occurred? Well, because we're part-time and that's not our role. The role, as the charter is set forth, is for the executive to have that oversight with us as a check and a balance, and I think that's the way to go. So I think it would be very imprudent for us just to leave us as a council body hanging out there to be the ones having to fire a sheriff any further than we already went with this.
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you. I appreciate my colleagues' comments there with respect to the 87, 88 other counties. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't you say that prior to your being elected, the 3 prior elected sheriffs were all indicted?
Yes.
that's not a good track record. And I don't want to go back to the past. I want to move forward. So to that argument, I mean, that wasn't brought up last time I went through all the weeds on the charter amendment issue. That wasn't brought up, but that's news to me. The other two, I was too young, so that's okay. But
Actually, so was I.
but yeah, so we're focused on Cuyahoga County. I'd like to ask the sponsor of the legislation, Mr.
Kelly.
Mr. Kelly. I almost said Sweeney. Mr. Kelly, what do you have any response to the question of oversight or the concern about oversight that Ms. Simon brought up? Because that's and Mr. Sweeney, because that is a bit concerning to me too, and I just want to hear what you might think in the way of that question.
So I'm looking at this from the law enforcement side, and in order for the sheriff to do his job without being too worried about who's standing looking over his shoulder, I think he needs the opportunity to do his job. He can always be summoned if there's a particular problem, but I think the most autonomy possible to give him, other than being elected, would be to go with with this draft for this ordinance. And I believe it would give the sheriff his most autonomous way of doing things.
So there's no concern on your part that no one's minding the hen house, so to speak. You know, right now we have the executive who could put his nose in there and sniff around, but right now, if we go to this without oversight, again, as Ms. Simon said, we usually, I don't want to have to deal with things after the fact. That's when we would get involved, after there would be an issue. And that's just a little concerning to me that we would not have the ability, or somebody, not us, would have the ability to see what's going on, make sure things are, maybe that could come in the form of the report. Maybe it could be more specific, the report, what we asked for in that report. So maybe that would be something we could, shore up a little bit as far as the reporting duties, and that might address some of Mr. Sweeney's concerns too about that word report, So just some of my thoughts. I mean, I think a lot of good points have been made on both sides of this argument, and I think we should have a little bit more discussion on this, and you guys might disagree with me, but I think we're close to trying to get to where we want to be, but I'd like to have a better comfort level with moving forward on the legislation. But I'm close, but things like that, reporting duty, reporting definition, I'd like some clarity, more clarity on that. And then the last question I have, if I could through the chair, is just to the law department. Is this something we are capable of, council is capable of codifying without having to go through a charter amendment like we did the last time?
Mr. Chairman, of the councilman, either version of these ordinances, I think, could be enacted by council at this
Okay.
point. I don't see either of them conflicting with what's in the charter right now.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just to comment on Councilwoman Sonny Simons, I don't necessarily buy into the concept that he has to be managed for us to be able to provide oversight. We can still provide oversight. We are a check and balance government. We provide oversight to an executive who has no reporting structure. What we are doing is, I believe, creating a better relationship between the executive and the sheriff, and we will continue to provide the necessary and appropriate oversight, whether he reports to anyone or does not have a direct report. Our ability to provide oversight does not diminish and it does not change.
Okay. Mr. Chairman? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to my council president. Could you define what oversight would be from your perspective, from this body? I don't see it other than we have our safety committee. When we do the oversight of the administration, we have 10 absolutely hardworking council committees. And this would all fall under the preview of the safety committee to understand all the intimate details into the weeds, like Councilwoman Simon said, and having the responsibility to understand what the sheriff is doing to the in-depth level.
I think we all know our oversight of our responsibilities. All 11 of us have that responsibility. The Public Safety Committee, of course, is where we roll up our sleeves to do that in-depth work, and any councilman like myself can come and attend a committee that I'm not necessarily a
absolutely.
part
That's
of
what I'm
to
here for.
provide the opportunity.
So you're comfortable saying the oversight of the jail, if they're not reporting to the executive, because that could happen with this piece of legislation, will fall on the council's oversight, and we'll do it through the safety committee, just so I can have an understanding.
Yeah, this legislation does not change our oversight ability. This legislation does not change it. We still have the same responsibility and capacity under this legislation as we did before.
I'm just through the chair. Right now, he reports to the executive. And
Or the executive designee. At this point, my understanding, and they can feel free to correct me, the administration, I believe it is the executive, Eric Wobster, and then the sheriff.
it's my
if I'm
understanding,
correct.
through the chair to my council president, the org chart has him directly reporting to the county executive.
Is that,
right
okay,
now.
I stand corrected.
And if the if he chooses not to, which he can, and he reports only to us because we have the ability to terminate him or her, that means, in my eyes, we have more oversight responsibilities because all the other folks we report to the executive, and we could, through our committee structure, get their take on it. And with the sheriff, would you be independently coming in, which is a little bit different. So that's just in my.
That's one perspective. Another perspective could be, we have identified some weaknesses in the reporting structure now, in terms of their ability to ask for resources that they think they might need, other weaknesses, and by separating them, we might have reduced an area of necessary oversight because we have streamlined and made it more efficient and effective.
And that's our hope. I think, and through the chair, it's all about personalities. If we have a good sheriff, we're fine. If we have a sheriff that is doing things that are bad, like there have been in the past, and we don't see it, and we don't cover it, and we can't look through the weeds and find it, that's where we're exposed, as Councilwoman Simon said. And I really don't want to take that responsibility because it's, as the charter reads, according to the learning curve I had from Councilwoman Simon, was subsection whatever says all departments, the county executive supervises all departments. And with the piece of legislation, it was just trying to define the reporting structure, which we'll get to. And I'm not going to belabor mine much because we're doing a pretty good job here. So that's the structure of our charter. It says he's responsible for reporting. And this legislation is just changing it all, and then it becomes our responsibility. So thank you for your comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your patience with me. And I have one question for my colleague over here, the sponsor. Just with the letter you received from the county executive, and I think Greg answered it. Is that the response?
Mr.
To the, my colleague from the chair here. So the executive had some issues, right? You saw the letter, right? So, previous draft of this ordinance was reviewed and discussed with the law department, and some of the provisions in the ordinance were specifically added at their request to this new one, okay? To the 05. And so that came from the law department, some of the changes was in it. And the only substantive difference between this ordinance and the version previously reviewed by the law department is the addition of quarterly reporting requirements, which is common for a legislative oversight.
Yeah, I just was wondering, because I received it and I didn't understand exactly what it, but it was someone answered.
Mr. Chairman, I want to clarify something, please. The question that Councilman Tuma asked is not the same question that's in the executive's letter. Councilman Tuma asked me if this ordinance as it is could be passed, and I said yes. The question that's in the council or the executive's letter is whether or not council could make him independent. The word independent doesn't appear anywhere here. So this doesn't make him independent. The sheriff is still part of the administrative functions of the county, and the executive is responsible for the administrative functions of the county. And in fact, paragraph 10 of section 3.09 of the charter says the council can't interact or can't, except for purposes of inquiry, the council and its members shall deal with the administrative services solely through the county executive. So this doesn't make him independent. This just changes how, the fact that he is now would be required to report quarterly to the executive and required to report quarterly to the council and as needed, as otherwise requested.
Thank you for the clarifying, because I
as
had a
with,
misunderstanding what you said. Thank you.
Regarding the oversight, we are oversight. And let me take you down a trail not long ago where things were going on at the jail. The council, on its own volition, ordered and approved and gave money to hire more nurses at the jail. We thought it was done. We thought it was in the process. We thought it was okie dokie. And not until people started to die, not en masse, but had a death, and then I get a whistleblower call who turned out to be the doctor at the jail, telling me that the nurses were not hired, and we weren't told. The sheriff knew it, the executive knew it, the doctor knew it, the nurses knew it, everybody knew it, but we didn't know it. So we called them in, and that's when the whole thing blew up, the Ken Mills debacle. Mm-hmm. The thing that we have in our pocket today that we didn't have back then, although we did have it, we didn't realize we had it, that if you stand at that podium in this building or any other building testifying to this council and you lie, you are subject to a felony. I recommend anybody talk to Mr. Ken Mills about that. And that was all predicated on the movements of an administration organizing through Mr. Mills, who ran the jail, structured by the executive, and cutting out the sheriff, who at that time disappointed me greatly by not standing up and screaming at as loud as he could that this is wrong. And many people came in and stood at that podium, and instead of asking or answering direct questions, fudged around it. And when I got to talk to him away from the podium, why wouldn't you answer my question? I don't want to lose my job. I got a year left. I got 2 kids. When you have anybody over somebody holding that kind of power and you don't have an ability to get to the truth, you're gonna have situations like that. And that's proof positive of that. We seem to be the last in line to learn of all these things that are happening in the county that we thought we've done good. Ms. Simons dealing with Say Yes. We thought we did a great thing. Read the Plain Dealer for the past 3 months on how horrible we are because we did a great thing. And we lived up to exactly what we said we were going to do. Not according to them, not according to the people that they're out there telling to go call your council person because they're not good people. We weren't told the truth. And who didn't tell us the truth? People from our administration. But we found out last. We took the slings and arrows. We had to go testify in a criminal trial. I never in my life thought I'd have to testify in a criminal trial. And my testimony would put a man in jail who ultimately I don't believe belonged there. But who skated? The people with their thumbs on those people. Now what we do would Say Yes, that's still open. And she's my pit bull here, and I'm behind her 100%. Something like this doesn't take any power away from the executive, doesn't give council any more power than we have. Sheriff, I couldn't have more power over you if I wanted to right now. You're standing there. You're going to have to answer my questions, honestly. or I could send you to jail. That's power. So all we have to do is have the ability and the want to put people in front of us, ask them the questions, and that's our oversight. Anything else, we're just trying to help here. And I said it before last time, we wouldn't be talking about this if it still wasn't screwed up, if it still didn't have a flaw. And we've tried mightily to change it. And little pieces, parts are actually fitting into place. It's not exactly what I want, but what I want is not what everybody wants. So what I really want right now is try the best we can to give whomever is in that seat as sheriff the ability to be the sheriff. And if that person needs money, the judges need money. We have oversight over their budget. How many times, my colleagues, have they come in front of us for more money? And every single time, and I can't think of a single time we haven't, we've heard their problems and we've given them more money because it was the right thing to do. That's our job. So for this legislation to be arguing about oversight, I think is a little bit ridiculous. I would agree it probably should be spelled out a little bit clearer, but the oversight is right in this room right now. That's the oversight. See something, say something. Bring them in and ask them the question. We did it before and we can do it again. The template is there. The power is in our seats right now to ask anybody at that podium a question. And if they lie, if they skirt the truth, they're going to have to deal with the justice system, not us. We didn't make them lie. We're asking questions and we only ask questions that make sense, I think. Why didn't you hire the nurses? Why? We've had deaths occur because of that. Direct relationship to not having enough medical on staff. And it continued to get covered up, in my opinion. And the end result was the end result. So out of something bad, sometimes comes something good. And the something good is our ability to have oversight with the power of the law and the ability to take anybody that stands at that podium and lies and doesn't tell us the truth, to forward them to the prosecutor for a prosecution under a felony. Under a felony. That's the most powerful thing I've ever seen in my life in an elected position. So we do have oversight. It's in our bailiwick to do it. We should do it more, but we don't want to be micromanaging. I have to trust that the people put in an executive that knows what he or she is doing. I have to trust that that executive's going to choose people that know what they're doing. Our ability at that point in time, if it's a confirmable position, we have an opportunity to question that person, look at their history and decide, are they that person or not? I'm of the opinion, let that person go. I have not talked to anybody other than the sheriff, really, because I want them to do their job, unfettered. The only reason we all got in with the sheriff is because of all the problems we had in that damn jail. They're a little bit better, but now we have to struggle with the new jail and those troubles. So yes, I want the executive to continue to appoint. I want the council to continue to confirm. I want whoever is the sheriff to come in and be able to go into their office and pick up a phone and make decisions without coming back to us, unless it's necessary. And we are here and always have been here for anybody in this county to come tell us what their problems are, their concerns, and we show up and we deliver if we can, within reason. So I love the fact that we're having this good debate. I think it's healthy for us to have that. There obviously are different meetings of minds going different ways, but I think ultimately we're trying to do one thing, and that's strengthen the position of the sheriff, short of going to the ultimate, what the other 87 counties do. We have this charter, we have to deal with it. We've gone through a change to help that out. Some good, some not so good. We tweak here, we tweak there. I think this encourages whoever that person is to take control and be the sheriff. And I don't want to be bringing the sheriff in to answer questions about why things are happening. I'll read the report every 3 months. We don't talk to the judges until they do their budget. We have no need. They do their job. We do ours. They need help. They come to us. It's all taken care of. So I appreciate the debate. I think this is legislation that moves us in a more positive direction. I don't think it hurts anything. And if there's a question of oversight, look in the mirror. We got it. We've got it in spades. Got a problem with somebody? If a sheriff goes in there and I sense that, if I get a call, they're coming in. God forbid they tell me a lie, because I'll send it to the prosecutor like that. And they all know it. And they all know we're of the like mind to do that. And that's out there in the street. And I think it's a very powerful thing. I think it's a very powerful thing that you keep your powder dry, you do the best you can, and hope and pray people do the best they can. And I think we're all focused on this county moving forward. I think we're all very tired of dealing with sheriffs and jails. But we all know we're going to continue to do that. But we have the power within our seats to do it. Mr. Sweeney.
I'll be very brief. Just ridiculous for the oversight. I just have a difference of opinion.
And that's fine.
Yeah, and for us to have to get a phone call, hear from the whoever, and we get them a lot, to have them come in on every time, and we meet every 2 weeks. I don't think we're functionally set up for this large of a oversight responsibility. So I throw that out as my opinion. And when you mentioned, I hope, and we're going with a good sheriff, but we've had a history of bad sheriffs or bad executives scaring the good sheriffs. And if we have a bad sheriff that is concealing and making false reports, and we have to have more oversight, I think. And I want to throw it to the administration instead of us. And with the judges, I think they're all elected compared to the sheriff, so it's a little bit different. So I will not mention anything else on this piece of legislation. Thank you for the deference.
Mr. Miller.
Just a brief comment as the chairman of Finance and Budget that the section about being able to submit supplemental budget requests, that's not important just for the sheriff. That's important for every department, and it's just very important that the executive create an atmosphere where his directors feel free to come to the council and give us the real skinny as to what's going on in their departments and what their needs are. And as the chairman suggested, we've exercised our oversight and we've dealt with stuff. Could it be better? Yes, probably it could be better. But we've done it. In the last budget update, we noted the fact that the budget provided no money for overtime in the sheriff's department, and that $7 million in overtime is hardwired into the collective bargaining agreements. And so we added $10 million for 2023 and by council action. So we have to create the atmosphere where the information flows and that the executive and the council can work together to provide for the needs of the citizens of Cuyahoga County. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Council President.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of the time, and this body takes the discussion time it needs and should take that time. But I just want to share with you, in our last experience with Christopher Violent, we were at a moment where we said, well, let's put Violent in place for a time, and we'll hold the legislation and come back, see how he feels. Well, he served for 6 months, came back to him, and he said everything was fine. He didn't need to change anything. And that is when our legislation kind of died down. I realized then from that experience, we don't want to put the sheriff or our new sheriff in the position of having to weigh in on that job. Whatever decisions we do, as we've done for 12 years, for me, it was a unique situation to find that the sheriff didn't want to weigh in, and he was quite comfortable with the way things were. Okay, and it didn't give us the I think the deep insight that we could have had he been a retired sheriff, or he said no, everything is fine. He wasn't changing the system the way it was. So I would not want to put our current sheriff in the position of him having to weigh in on how his position is seen, oversaw, or anything like that. I think we will talk to whoever we need to, do whatever we need to do, but the idea of having to put him in the position of saying anything more than I can work in the environment that I find myself in now, that's all I would expect anyone in that position to say. So I hope that made sense to you.
I'll just wait till my
No.
legislation.
Any response, any thoughts?
And
Do
Sheriff,
I need to clarify what I was trying to say?
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
But you were right, and to pat the council on the back, they got HR and the sheriff's department because of the council. Because the sheriff was coming to us saying, I need more people. And the logjam was with the regular HR, and it's loosened things up a little bit. So that was very helpful. So there are things that we do that are good. Dealing with human beings, we're flawed. I mean, we're just flawed. I think I've been wrong a couple times. And that was for,
I don't
that was
agree
for
with
Ms. Simon. But I think this has been a very good discussion. I think it's been helpful in letting us air out where we think we are and what we think we need to do. And I think all of us, to an individual, wants the executive to appoint a competent sheriff that has the ability to go do their job, period. And that's where I'm at. I don't want to micromanage. I want nothing to do with their personnel. I just want them to be able to do their job. And God forbid, when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, they'll be standing at that podium, and I'll want to know why. And that's my oversight. Unless, of course, I'm not told about it, and it's withheld, and we have a dog chasing its tail again, which I'm hopeful we won't ever have again. I'll turn to Mr. Kelly. What's your pleasure, sir?
I'd like to see if we could move this forward to it either works or it doesn't work.
Before calling the roll, you mind if I poll council? Ms. Simons would prefer to wait?
I'm a no vote.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, Mr. Tuma?
I mean, I would prefer to clarify the reporting requirement.
Okay.
That's me.
Then why don't we hold that then?
Chair, I'm sorry, I'm saying no to which piece of, we have
Oh, no,
two
you're
in front of us.
You're not going to move forward regardless.
Well, I'm inclined, if we had a vote, to go with Councilman Sweeney's clarification. I think
And I
that's
think that's what we-
clarification that I would be open to considering, but I'm absolutely a no about no reporting to anybody.
Okay, fair enough. Why don't we hold this in committee? We can do any clarifications that Mr. Tuma and Mr. Sweeney think necessary, if you're in agreement with that. And we'll meet in 2 weeks and we'll discuss then. Fair enough. And I will extend an invitation to Mr. Fitzgerald. Don't hold your breath on that. I talk to him a couple times a year. So this give me an opportunity to catch up. Sheriff, I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day and away from your family. I know you just had a tragedy, and I apologize for having you come in here. And I hope to see you again.
Thanks, Council. Thanks, Council President, all of Council, thank you. I appreciate being here, appreciate seeing you.
Thank you, sir.
Anytime.
Janine, 03? Or, yeah, 03.
Ordinance number 2023-0003, amending section 202.07 of the county code to clarify the reporting of the county sheriffs.
We had a lengthy discussion on this. Mr. Sweeney, this is your legislation.
Yeah, I'm just going to recap real fast. And to the council president, I have two very brief questions to the sheriff.
Oh.
In regards to, our current sheriff.
Oh.
In regards to functionality, and you just told me you prefer not to, but I have it part of my my piece of legislation, and they're not really tricky ones.
If you, Sheriff, if you could.
And I told them what they were beforehand, so I'm not cold cocking them.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
It's courtesy, and I'm trying to do it, and I don't know if you
That's
guys
fine.
communicated and try to get me.
And the spirit of mine was not that I don't want him to, this is totally appropriate for you to ask. My feeling has been, and I experienced that directors, like even during the budget time,
Yeah.
and you say, what do you need? And they say, I can operate within the budget that I've been given.
Yeah.
No,
They say it all the
absolutely.
time. But the seasoned directors would sit down with their chair in years past and say, what do you need to maintain your critical services? You see, and then they would tell us, if I have this, then I'm not gonna embarrass the county, I'm not gonna break the county, and then we would do that without them having to.
With my first
You
budget
see?
here?
So that was the spirit of what I was saying, not that you should not or could not.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, Sheriff, and thank
Good
you for
afternoon.
working as hard as you do. Just, you read the legislation, and the question I have, and Councilman Tuma a little bit, what would you envision a quarterly report to be, and what would it include?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank opportunity for coming up and speaking. I always welcome any opportunity to talk to county council, so thank you for bringing me up. I was not prepared to speak today, so I will answer any questions the
And I
best I
know
can
that.
with what I can do. But I also want to say, and through the chair to Councilman Kelly and stuff like that, and all the other people here, I really do appreciate the council's interest in wanting the sheriff to be successful. I really do, and I understand that everyone that's what the strive and what we're trying to get to. So I thank you guys for your attention to this and trying to help the best they can. So whatever comes out of these legislations and what moves forward with the current administration and the pattern between the current administration, county council, and the sheriff, I do want to say thank you for you guys' opportunity to, help the sheriff, to what you guys feel is best. As for the quarterly report, I don't have a detailed answer for that. I would assume that you're going to want some information on basically.
Why don't, I can stop you there just to help you. Since we're holding the legislation, Mr. Chairman, and give you an opportunity to ponder it, I'll be more than happy to wait until the next committee meeting or before to give me your thoughts after you talk it through with your team.
And I could give it more detail, but I would assume it would, it would be basically reports on the jail, finances, different operations within the jail in the totality. I don't know if you guys are looking for, how far into the weeds, how detailed it's going to be, a general operation of how the sheriff's department is functioning within that quarter. But we can always have that discussion, and I can see what is, what we can do to, fine tune that answer for you. Yes.
And thank you. And one other question, just very briefly. I had the privilege of sitting in the Budget and Finance Committee, and we had a very healthy discussion on ERP. And I was only been part of this council for 3 years now, and the ERP system came in years ago, and it had high hopes, it had some challenges, but it got to the finish line. That's what I learned. And each of the departments are using the ERP, and most of them are using it for payroll. But what I've learned is HR, public service, and another one are the three biggest users of it. And I'm just wondering what kind of association that the sheriff's department would have with ERP. I know you don't have the answer, but of all the departments that I'm thinking about, the ERP could be the most beneficial to that department. And it is a entity that's driven by the administration. So that's through the chair. Your thoughts on ERP, if you have any?
Once
Besides the
again,
payroll.
the only thing I could speak of is I know we use it for the payroll system. I know HR uses it as well in some of their duties. I can't give you specifics to the extent of that, but I'm more than happy to get that information for you and report later.
Good, because it's all about efficiencies from my understanding. Well, those are my two questions for the sheriff, and I'll just go over 3 points why I think the legislation is important, and then I'll shut up. Oh, she didn't read it?
Did you read it? Oh, you
Yes.
did? Okay, I'm
Yeah, I
sorry,
thought you
go
did.
ahead. Thank you, Sheriff.
Okay, I want to thank the chairman and my president and my colleagues. You heard my spiel last time. I went up there, so I'm gonna just do it from here if you don't mind. And it's the genesis of the first hearing. I brought the whole TV thing last time. 8 out of the 11 of my colleagues looked right on that square Zoom saying he should report to the sheriff, not to the Corey, not to Bill or Mr. Mason or the executive, or to the executive. So I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Let's kind of codify, it goes right there, and then it's case closed. So that's how this started. And then, once I'm doing my due diligence through Mike King and then through Councilwoman Simon, it's that in the charter says supervise. And it could be interpreted that the county executive supervises, but in the past practice that I experienced, the previous county administrator or executive defined supervise as Mr. Corey, Mr. Mason, and himself in that chain. So I'm just trying to define what our charter says, to be very, very specific. That gives the executive no discretion on who he reports to. And I mean, I keep going back to the personalities driving our decisions. And it seems like we're doing that. And no matter who the personalities are there, the sheriff codified reports directly to the executive. So I'm not going to keep beating this drum or beating this horse. And I talked to the chairman. We don't got the votes, or it came dead on arrival. But I just think in my own principled mindset, I wanted to bring it to my colleagues and share my thoughts and ask you to consider it. And if this is going to be held, I wouldn't mind at some point, the whole body making a decision. If it goes up or down, so be it. At least I tried. Thank you.
And we've never had this, so this is kind of new waters. I'm going to call for a vote. If it's unsuccessful, it'll stay in committee for 2 years, at which point it dies. If you want to reintroduce it, in that 2-year period, we can talk about it, bring it back to committee. If you want to massage it, we can go that route.
That's fine.
Mr. Chairman, I would just point out that under the rules, if it's held when you get to the end of the 2 years, the sponsor does have the right to tell the clerk to keep it alive, so it doesn't necessarily
Right,
die. It's
right.
at the sponsor's discretion.
Right. But, and at this point, and again, I'll call a vote if you want to hold it. I just don't want it lingering in committee.
I have no problem with you calling the vote, but I'm going to be persistent that I want the whole council to weigh in on it.
Fair
And
enough.
then you'll hear me beating my drum.
That's fair, fair enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
Mr. Chair, I guess before we vote on this piece, if I can,
Yes.
weigh in, I would like the executive to have some flexibility as an overseer, supervisor, to delegate to a Bob Corey or whomever that equivalent may be for things that are not routine daily issues instead of, so that's where I have an issue. I don't see why that can't happen. So I would need more time to work that piece out. I don't think it should be all or nothing. I think we talked about routine things, being able to go through a director, and if it's something of more importance, that it goes directly to the exec, if we had to clarify anything.
I'm good with that, Mr. Chairman.
So we would need an amendment to that, and I don't know if we're going to get that in today's hearing. So if we're calling a vote through the chair, then
I'll do this. Why don't we hold it? You can talk to Ms. Simon. I'm not in a hurry. I just don't want anything lingering. That's my whole thing. So we'll hold again. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
with both coming back, or just, we'll see?
Well,
Okay.
I don't know about the other one.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
that there's got to be some thought put into that.
Okay.
And some discussions held.
Okay.
As with this,
Yeah,
so.
to define that, you just said both are going to come back to committee to be
I
voted out.
asked, I just
If
asked
I-
that
If I
question.
hold them, it both will,
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, I'd like to mind heard in if 2 weeks is enough time to figure it out.
If you can get it done 2 weeks, yeah.
I think we can, I mean, it's an amendment. It's very simple, and I'm okay with it, so we'll just have to draft it.
Okay. Well, let's hold it. Depending on what we get legislatively, or if this is it, we'll see in 2 weeks if it's done. We all in agreement with that? We're all good? Any miscellaneous? Thank you.